Hi guys, my name's Aaron. I'm the owner of the Husqvarna 701 GSXR 1000 turbo conversion that some people have seen online. I've had a lot of questions, a lot of queries, a lot of people asking to see some more information about the build. So I thought I'd just put a little slide together talking you through the process and yeah, let's get to it. So I bought the bike in 2021 brand new. Had fun with it over the summer. The winter came in, all my friends put the bikes away, and I just got the itch really. I just wanted to build something a bit wacky, a bit crazy, something a bit out of the ordinary that no one's really done before with the turbo. So I started looking for engines. I came across after some time a GSXR 1000 lump. It was perfect to donor really because it was a big CC build from many years ago. It had Carrillo rods, CP pistons, 660 Decker injectors, a multi-stage lockup clutch, and a T28 turbo. So not too big, but not too small either. So it were just a perfect donor really. I started then looking for fabricators and people that were experienced in engine conversions because obviously I wanted the bike to be safe and obviously done right. I've no experience with actual welding myself, so I needed to find the right person. I came across Chris Thorpe on YouTube. He'd done some dirt bike stuff before. And he seemed to know exactly what he was doing, so I reached out to him. We came to an agreement. I dropped the bike off. He got the engine fabricated in there, did a great job of the fabrication work. And then after about 6 months, I got the bike back rolling, and then I had to start the proceedings to essentially make it rideable and tunable, really. So straight away, I had major issues with the front forks. The back suspension was never really an issue because I just put the highest weight rider springs in the back. Obviously, I'm only around 12 stone, so the 17-stroke, 18-stone rider springs were more than adequate enough to support the rear. The front, unfortunately, made massive impact with the turbo and the oil feed. Obviously, the bike's never designed to not have travel. It's designed to have travel. So I had to create a massive restriction inside the suspension. Shocktech over at Sheffield did all of the suspension modifications. They increased the oil. They also put bigger coil springs in the front forks, and then we created an actual restriction to stop it bottoming out. So all the front forks now are all done. I've got about 90 to 100 millimeter of usable travel, which is pretty much similar to what a super bike is. So yeah, overall the fronts of forks are all completed. So originally I was going to use the 701 radiator. This was just mocked up and just on the bike, but it was just not adequate enough. It was just too small. I just knew that I'd have had problems in future on hot days and so forth. I couldn't get a fan in there, and it was just a recipe for disaster really. So I bought an old radiator from a GSXR 1000, fabricated it on, got it all to fit and everything else, mocked everything up, and then I basically bought a brand new one, and that's the radiator installed with the OEM fan. So the next job was to pull the turbo. The turbo originally were only installed for fabrication purposes. It had to have all new gaskets. The mating surfaces need to be cleaned. I had to check the wastegate were operating correctly. I had a couple of leaky AN lines, one that went to the feed and then obviously one that went to the oil cooler. I had an issue with the oil return. The sump had to come off. The bung wasn't right, so I had to resolve that issue. There was a couple of bits of welding that I had to do. I had to swivel the wastegate pipe and also refabricate the downpipe to suit, obviously, this bike instead of the GSXR. And then, yeah, basically beefed up the manifold a little bit, wrapped the headers, and then got the turbo kit back reinstalled. So the next stage was the wiring. So the wiring that I originally got with the engine were just atrocious. There were bullet connectors, there were joints, there were all sorts of repairs to it already. It was just really old, frail, crispy. Just not what you want in a wiring loom at all. So I decided to buy a really low mileage, good condition wiring loom. I stripped it right back to every wire, inspected every wire, re-wrapped it all in the best shape I could to fit the bike, and then basically slowly made it fit. Originally, I was always very adamant that I wanted the bike to be OEM. I wanted it to look like a production factory bike. I know it was very hard to achieve because obviously of the extensive modifications to the bike, but I wanted it to work properly. So I wanted the indicators to work, the headlights to work, the pass lights to work, the high beam, the indicators, the hazard lights, the horn, the front brake, the rear brake. I wanted everything to work like an OEM bike. So I had to buy all of the switch gear, the running gear, switches I had to make, the rear brake switch. I had to do a lot of custom wiring to the bike to get it OEM, essentially. So I achieved that in the end, and I'm really happy with the way it worked out. So essentially now the bike was starting, turning over. It was now time to drop the motor off the mounts again, pull the intake plenum off, get the throttle bodies out, and basically recondition everything. So change all the vac hoses, the hoses that go to the fuel pressure regulator, the hoses that goes to the map sensor, the hoses that go to the blow-off valve. I had to basically recondition all of the one-way valve system, and then pull the injectors. So I took the injectors down to my mates down at Motorsport and Performance. They showed me how to work the ASNU machine and got the injectors ultrasonically cleaned and then flow tested. Just ready for tuning, really. It's good practice, obviously. If you're having a bike tuned and the injectors aren't all flowing right, then you're going to get differences in the air fuel between cylinders, and obviously it just leads to increased wear on the engine, if not damage to it further down the line. So it was important that I got that done. So now stuff started to get quite difficult. Obviously I had to work out the fuel system. I needed a fuel system that was capable of running up to 300 horsepower, that also had a return system. So the original fuel tank on this bike, on the 701, the tank is actually under the seat, it's at the back. It doesn't have a return line. The return system as part of the original Husqvarna 701 is built into the regulator that's inside the tank. So the whole original fuel pump had to come out, and then I had to start taking measurements. I had to start basically going through the drawing board to find out exactly what the biggest sized, lowest ampage pump I could buy that would enable me to have the right litres per hour to provide the turbo motor at full boost. I had a good friend of mine, Eddie Hall. He really helped me out with the CNC side of things. I had to design something that was basically a new feed and return for the top of the tank that also enabled me to pass through the power to the pump, but then also create some form of hanger for a pump that was twice as big on the underside of the tank. As you can see, I had to slightly modify the inside of the tank and use CV boot clips to mount the pump. But fortunately we got there. I got a 39mm pump in there, which were good for 255 litres per hour. So yeah, got all the fuel system sorted in the end. So now the wiring harness was complete, the forks were all resolved with the travel issues, the fuel system was all working with the fuel pressure regulator and the return system. It was now onto the cosmetic things. So there were a few adjustments to the seat mount and things, because it was very difficult to attach the seat. Things obviously didn't line up very well, because obviously the engine's a hell of a lot bigger than the original one, so the panels had to be sprayed out a lot. So I had to modify some of the brackets and the push fit bobbins. And then it was on to the plumbing. So I'd also like to just say thanks to Robert Matheson at Auto Silicone Hoses, Ash Silicone, for all of the hoses, the clamps, the silicone pipes and everything else, which enabled me to get all the radiator and breather hoses and so forth plumbed up. Then I finished off the drivetrain. Obviously I'd converted the bike from 520 to 530, and as a result in doing that I had to modify all the guides, the runners and the chain block at the back. It was very hard to machine out of that, because it was really awkward positioning, because it was being square and internal. But I got there in the end with it. Then it were onto the clocks, so mounted the clocks. The clutch cable, originally ordered one in 4-inch longer, but that was unnecessary. I just used a stock new clutch ordered from Suzuki. The front and the rear brake lines were ordered from a KTM Enduro 690 non-ABS version from an 08 plate bike. Deleted the ABS as part of the build. Then got the bike running in the car park. I did a few laps around the car park, made sure the cooling system and everything was had no air locks and I wasn't overheating or anything. Went through all the gearbox, everything was all good, and then basically got prepared on the Monday, and I was down at BIGcc on the Wednesday. I chose BIGcc because they had involvement with the original build of the engine. They're the leaders in the game in terms of big power jigsaw builds. They're very familiar with the tuning, and yeah, really happy with the decision. The bike did 209 or 207 wheel horsepower at low boost, which was a spring pressure 6 psi, and then we did a little high boost run at 10 psi, which is controlled through the solenoid, and I think that generated, I think it was 237 wheel horsepower, which are just absolutely ridiculous numbers for this sort of bike. But yeah, overall really happy with everything, and thanks for watching. I'll let you guys watch a bit of footage from the dyno day, and if you've got any questions, yeah, just give me a shout. Cheers guys.